Okay, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. So we'll just kind of wait for kind of 5-10 seconds for everyone to join in. We welcome all of you, inshallah, for this first session on the crucial subject of marital discord. The first session, inshallah, is going to be, as you're aware, mashallah, we have got the likes of Sheikh Aisha Wazwaz, who has joined us for this particular show. And we also have Ustaza Temia Zubair as well. And I will just be doing the introductions in a bit. I will just kind of wait for some people to join in, inshallah, for 30-40 seconds before we do that. So basically, this is a series which we conceived a while back. And the series is a 3-part series. And this is obviously the first part of that series on this critical, you can say, subject of marital discord and the issues around that. The first series is going to be focusing mostly towards the issues around the sisters, the wives and the wives-to-be, the advice to the wives and the wives-to-be. And inshallah, in the second session, which is going to be on the 12th of July, we are going to be having Sheikh Abdul Rahim McCarthy as well as Sheikh Basim Kemson, inshallah, which is going to be mostly relating to advice to the brothers, the husband and the husbands-to-be, inshallah. So this is, inshallah, the format. And then final, inshallah, on the 19th of July, which is the last part of this series, we are going to be discussing kind of the conclusions from both the sessions. And largely, that will be focused mostly on the questions and answers, inshallah. So just now, I'll do the introductions now. So Sheikh Aisha Wazwaz, mashallah, she has done her bachelor's and master's from Al-Quds University from Palestine, and she has done her PhD in contemporary Islamic studies as well from Lebanon. Mashallah, she's been very active in the field of dawah for a number of years, and alhamdulillah, it's our honor that she is with us today. Ustaza Temia Zubair, mashallah, she has been involved in obviously dawah and mostly the Quranic and the Hadith studies for over, I think, please correct me if I am wrong, I think 10 to 12 years, mashallah, tabarakallah. And she is attached with obviously Al Huda Institute, and she is a tutor and instructor there as well as Al Maghrib. Also, Sheikh Aisha, she runs the Gems of Light Academy in Minnesota, which is a platform, mashallah, which she has built over a number of years. So this is the intro to the panelists for today, inshallah. I'll be now handing it over to Sister Saba. So Sister Saba, I think your mic is unmuted. You can unmute it, inshallah. And she'll be running the show for today, inshallah, with most of the questions, and I will just be interjecting wherever really required. So Jazakumullah khair to all, everyone who has joined in, to the panelists, and over to Sister Saba, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Abu Fatima. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي ربنا زدنا علما ربي يسر ولا تعسر وتمم بالخير وبك نستعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to all our viewers and our respected guests, Sheikh Aisha Wazwaz and Ustaza Temia Zubair. So we welcome you both in our show. So I'll start the questions with Sheikh Aisha. Sheikh, what do you think, in your opinion, we women are nowadays lacking in fulfilling our primary responsibilities in our marriages, whether it be towards our husbands or children or in-laws?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. When we're speaking about women, I think a number of issues we must consider in the light of the modern, postmodern culture / the feminist wave that is totally different than the Muslim understanding of what is human, what is feminine, and what our responsibilities are in the social dynamics that we live in. And that is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually says, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أَنْ خَلَقَ لَكُم مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُم مَّوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً. When we look at this ayah, that from the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that He created from amongst yourselves أَزْوَاجًا لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا, pairs in order for you to find tranquility in, وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُم مَّوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً, and created from within you. جَعَلَ بَيْنَكُم means that He had created and also put within you mawadda and rahma, love and mercy. Now, looking at that, the relationship between male and female is not a relationship of battle and fight, but is actually a relationship of where one would console the other, one would embrace the other. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually says, يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسُ اتَّقُوا رَبَّكُمُ الَّذِي خَلَقَكُم مِّن نَّفْسٍ وَاحِدَةٍ وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء. يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسُ اتَّقُوا رَبَّكُم, O people, fear your Lord Almighty that created you from one soul, وَخَلَقَ مِنْهَا زَوْجَهَا, and created from it its own pair, وَبَثَّ مِنْهُمَا رِجَالًا كَثِيرًا وَنِسَاءً, and created from them رِجَالًا كَثِيرًا وَنِسَاءً, many men and many women. When we look at these two ayat, we see that the relationship between man and woman is not a relationship of battle or competition, but is actually a relationship where we would complete the work of the other, and we would bring about that relationship in stability and love and mercy. But on the other hand, when we look at feminism, it is always about bringing up a battle. It is always trying to convince the women that you have been oppressed all these years, and that it is time for you to leave the marriage bond. It is time for you to leave the men authority, in time for you to live independent and on your own, away from the male counterpart. In Islam, the male and men are not counterparts, but they're actually part of us. They're actually part of what makes this world and this life continue.
Yeah. Are you with us, Sheikha?
Yeah, she's.
Yes, I am done.
Okay, Jazakallah
take
khair,
over
Ms. Aisha. Yeah.
Okay.
Now,
Coming
just
to you.
just a small little interjection here, everyone. Guys, there's one of the problems with one of the feeds, I think, on Facebook, which is going live. So if anyone is on the live Deen Facebook page, please make sure that it's working. Jazakallah khair.
Okay. Ustaza Tamia, coming to you, as Sheikha has mentioned, that how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has defined the marital relationship between a man and a woman. Allah has also referred husband and wives in Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah number 187, as garments of one another, which we generally understand, I think, very superficially. I want you to elaborate this metaphor for us so we could understand its true essence, inshallah ta'ala.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والصلاة.
You're muted, Staza. Yeah.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم. جزاكم الله خيرا for having me. And the question that you've asked regarding the expression that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, or rather the analogy that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given in the Quran when it comes to the relationship between a husband and a wife is I think a very beautiful analogy where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that you are garments for them, meaning men are garments for their wives, and the wives are also garments for their women, for their husbands. Antum libasul lahunna sorry, هن لباس لكم وأنتم لباس لهن. And when we think about garments, I think these days especially, we pay a lot of attention to our physical appearance. We invest a whole lot of time and money and interest into our clothing. So much of our attention goes into looking good, wearing the best clothes, finding the best clothes. And this is simply because we do care about how we look. We definitely care about how we look. And when it comes to our clothing is a human need. It's not just something that covers us, but it is also something that beautifies us, and it is also something that brings us a comfort which nothing else can bring. We want our clothes to look good, also feel comfortable. And so if we were to think about the relationship of marriage in a similar way, that your spouse is not a burden, your spouse is not someone who is just now a big problem in your life. Your spouse and you also are supposed to be a source of comfort first and foremost, because if we look at the context of this example or of this analogy, it's given in the verses that talk about the month of Ramadan and the relationship between a husband and wife, the intimacy that is supposed to exist. It's the fact that a spouse has been described as a garment simply shows that we are in need of each other. So like Dr. Aisha mentioned, that it's not supposed to be a constant battle where we're constantly competing for that I don't need you, or I am completely independent of you. I can do without you. I don't care about you, or that I need to be better than you. If we were to stop viewing marriage like that and start looking at marriage as a blessing, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ, right? It is of His signs. It is of His miracles. So we should be looking at marriage as a blessing, as a source of comfort. And if we were to, treat our spouse respectfully, and sort of that, we are in need of our spouse, and our spouse also needs us, that would just make our life so much more peaceful and so much more happier. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala.
Jazakallah khair, Ustaza Tania, and you're right that this relationship is not a battle, it's a blessing. We should take it in that context. Coming to you, Sheikha Aisha, we sometimes see that husband and wife, they get into an argument where they come in a point that either one of them or both get very loud or sometimes unreasonable. So what would be an appropriate response, or should I say the behavior of a wife at that moment? Should she try to do tit for tat, or what would be the best response of her?
Well, in general, when it's a heated argument, I'm surprised that you actually went right directly to a heated argument and didn't actually start out with what makes a good argument. I think that's how we can start. What makes a good relationship? I think what makes a good relationship before we even get into a heated argument is mawadda and rahma, is that mutual respect, that mutual mawadda, that mutual love, that mutual mercy, that we would care for one another, and the foundation that we both work for the same purpose, that we both are working to get to Jannah. That should be the foundation, that we both are standing on the same base, that we share the same purpose, and that we are trying to get to the same goal. Now, if we may sometimes differ whether this does get us to that goal or not, then we can either go back to the Quran and Sunnah and see which is a better decision or idea that might take us to that position. But it's really important to keep in mind that indeed we can get into a discussion, but in the end, if it's not haram, if neither of the opinions is haram, then the husband will be the final decision maker. But regardless of that, I think it's really important when we get into an argument, remember, if the argument starts getting heated, talking back and debating during anger, it will not bring in positive outcomes, because the person is already heated. The person is right now thinking with his own ego, with his own taking everything personal. So in situations like that, winning the heart is more important than winning the argument. Winning the heart is more important than winning the argument. So be wise in choosing the times and when that person is willing to talk. And of course, sometimes I get a lot of those situations where the argument goes really heated and the person is not always ready to listen. So use the method of probably writing to that person rather than discussing it in person to person and them getting agitated with your voice tone or having meltdowns when certain topics are open. So understanding how to approach that dialogue or that heated argument is extremely important, because it's learning the method of how to get to the heart rather than focusing on that personal issue in our ego and getting too, what is the word that I could use, getting too agitated just about our persons rather than winning the heart. Because when you win the heart, you have won a path to making a unity. When you win the heart, you then win a friend. But when you focus on the argument, then you have lost your own heart, because it had become very personal and we're so focused on our pride. And when you're focused on the argument and focused on your own pride, then the other person is going to feel that it has gotten personal as well. And then they're going to feel that I'm going to need to win my own person, my own personal honor, my dignity, etc. Then you have lost the conversation. A conversation is supposed to be a dialogue where both sides share a common purpose and share a common ground. That's when it becomes a dialogue. When it's a husband and a wife, well, then definitely need to make sure that it's a dialogue and not one trying to compete or condescend the other. And that's why in Islam, it was always considering the adab of al-hiwar, the adab. You're not condescending the other, even if the person is not even Muslim. Even if they are kafir, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَجَادِلْهُمْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. جَادِلْهُمْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. ادْعُ إِلَى سَبِيلِ رَبِّكَ بِالْحِكْمَةِ وَالْمَوْعِظَةِ الْحَسَنَةِ. If this was not even a Muslim, call in the name of your Lord, call to the path of your Lord, بالحكمة, with wisdom, والموعظة الحسنة. الموعظة الحسنة is not only a good word, but it is a word that reaches out to the heart. That's why it's called al-hasana. Al-maw'idha is supposed to be a good word, but al-hasana is where it reaches the heart. If this is the situation with a non-Muslim, how is it with somebody you share bonds with? A bond that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually called al-mithaq al-ghalid. If that is the person that you share a house, that you share the mithaq al-ghalid with, not going to maw'idha hasana, that hikmah, that good kind word in order to build in a relationship. This is not an enemy. This is not me telling the women only, but this is also me telling the brothers as well. That we have to start with understanding that winning the heart is more important than winning the argument.
Okay, Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Asha. Ustaza Temia, now the counter question is that there are situations, obviously, where unfortunately there are difficult men out there. There are difficult husbands, difficult men, having a lot of demands. overbearing, difficult to kind of talk to, difficult to discuss to. They don't want to really have an argument. Common sense is not very common in those folks, really. So what is your advice to the sisters in those particular situations where the men are not really literally willing to listen?
I think when we reflect on the Quran, we have beautiful examples. We have the example of Asya, whose husband was Fir'aun, who was, worse than any man imaginable. And we see that, in the example of Asya, there's some winning and there's some losing, right? There was that case where Asya was able to, convince Fir'aun to not kill baby Musa, and Fir'aun agreed. And he not only spared the life of Musa alayhi salam, he actually, raised him. SubhanAllah, Asya, was able to convince him, La taqtuluhu. And we see on the other hand that when it came to her faith, she was, abused. She was basically killed. SubhanAllah. So I think one thing that we can take from this is that there's some winning and there's some losing. However, when it comes to, a situation of abuse, or where, where a woman is really being oppressed and mistreated, then unfortunately, a lot of times what we say to women is, just be patient. And I think that's very unhealthy, because a marriage is supposed to be a relationship of mawadda and rahma. And if I were to tell a woman like this, who's going through a situation of abuse, that, be patient, then that would be unfair. Because when she's just going to, keep suffering and suffering and suffering in the name of patience, then, she's not really getting from marriage what a person is supposed to get from marriage. And if that love for her husband is not there, then that's, that's a very hollow relationship. And that abuse is only going to perpetuate. But if, like what you mentioned, that, some men just don't want to listen, they're just, stubborn. It's not abuse, but it's just, it's my way or the highway. We see that there are difficult people in our lives that we just have to deal with. Sometimes it's your own children, sometimes it's your own, spouse, sometimes it's your own, sibling, or even your parents, that you're just not able to convince them. Then I think what really a person like this should do is, read about and study about how to, get people to agree with you, or how to, clarify yourself, or how to win, people's hearts. And then there's different ways. There's so much that has been written about this. There's so much research about this. So read about it. Perhaps you're not able to, express yourself clearly. You're not talking in the right way, because you see, whenever there is a problem, there are things that we can change, and there are things that we cannot change. So when it comes to things that we cannot change, that is, things that we just have to accept. But things that we are able to change, then we must do something to change them. And for that, we need to realize what is within our power, what is within our control, and what is not. So change the changeable and accept the unchangeable. And when it comes to, your own self, then remember that, especially with the previous question that was about a heated argument, there's one way of, always arguing and always, getting into fights. But in a fight, in a heated argument, you really cannot, convince
There's no winners and losers, really. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So a better way would be to communicate yourself when you yourself are calm. And I think women must do that. They must communicate with their husbands. They must express themselves, before their husbands. That, for example, in a very calm, way, that the reason why I disagree with this, or the reason why I want to do this, or the reason why I want to do things differently is because of such and such and such. When you have a calm conversation, then you're able to get your point across. But when you're angry, the other person's angry, there's no winning, because shaitan is there. So express yourself, communicate definitely communicate with your spouse, but do it in the right way. And if you feel that you don't know how to communicate with your spouse, then perhaps, read about different ways in which you can do that. And it's definitely possible with, some learning and growth, inshallah.
Inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. That's obviously very, very sound advice. Now, Sheikha, continuing on the same kind of... Sorry, Sheikha, you wanted to say something?
Can I add on that? I think it's very important to mention that when you describe the case as a difficult man, I think by that definition, then we would know that they don't follow the common pattern / paradigm we find in most people. And its difficult cases may actually have an exception. It is usually a case-by-case issue where we would have to look into it, because the difficulty can sometimes be a result of an illness, a result of an upbringing, a result of a behavior, or sometimes a result of the person's own psychology. I mean, you look at the Prophet ﷺ told al-Ashaj Abd Qais, or al-Mundhir al-Ashaj ibn Abd Qais, he told him, إن فيك خصلتين يحبهم الله ورسوله, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves two different attributes or two different characters in you. And he told him that it was al-hilm wal-ana, it was forbearing and gentleness. And then he asked the question, is it something that I disciplined myself into, or is it something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created in me? The Prophet ﷺ tells him, and this is really important, بَلْ جَبَلَكَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِمَا. In fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created them within you. If we look at good characters, that they can be part of a person's DNA, a person's genes, the difficulty can also be al-hilm wal-ana, but on the other side, the opposite character can also be part of the person's character. And in situations like that, some people may indeed lose that gift. Just like Al-Ashaj had this gift, somebody may not have this gift. So in situations like that, I think we have to understand that it's a case by case. We have to see what the result and what the motive, or what is the cause of this difficulty. And sometimes it's not knowing what resulted, or what promoted, or what affected, or what influenced that kind of character to be difficult. And in situations like that, it's really important to understand what triggers that tantrum, what that person likes, and how to get to their heart. It's not always easy, I totally understand, but people are a lot more complex than putting them in categories. And in the end is that the Prophet ﷺ actually tells the women that they have a gift. They have a gift. And in the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says, مَا رَأَيْتُ مِن نَاقِصَاتِ عَقْلٍ وَدِينٍ أَذْهَبَ لِلُبِّ الرَّجُلِ الْحَازِمِ مِنْ إِحْدَاكُنْ. The Prophet ﷺ actually said, I have not seen women, or I have not seen any creatures, that is, that even though they lack lack certain religious duties, or even lack certain firmness on many matters, but they're more capable in controlling, or even أذهب للب الرجل الحازم, meaning that they're able to even take away the mind of the most tough of the men, the toughest of the men, and the most determined men. So that tells us that women actually do have powers, but sometimes it's about knowing how to use that power, but the power does not necessarily mean that it's about force. But despite all that was mentioned, it is important to keep note that indeed there are cases of difficult men where fisq, or person distancing himself from the deen, or even oppression involved, may require women to separate themselves from that environment and spare herself and even her children from a harmful environment on her deen, or a harmful environment on the children's physical health, or even psychological health. Because in the end, staying in a harmful environment may indeed be more dangerous and more harmful than leaving and considering probably divorce and separation. Because the general rule, the general maxim, that لا ضرر ولا ضرار, there should not be harm, and that any harm should be removed. So then we would look at it into a case by case and see it more harmful on her, on the children, on one, their deen, their body, on their health, on their mental stability, on chastity, on the honor for the family, and finally on the wealth. So we would look at it in these different categories: on the deen, the nafs, the aql, the ird, the man. The deen, the religiosity; the nafs, their health, their mind, their psychology, their the family, and also the wealth, which is the final part. So when we weigh all these, that's when we can make the decision. When we talk about a difficult man, sometimes we just think of difficult to mean that he's, just not willing to dialogue, but it could be a lot more than just a dialogue. It could be something that he's probably an alcoholic, or he's probably somebody that is violent and may even strangle the woman, etc. I get these kind of cases very, very often.
Yeah, no, inshallah, we'll be coming to probably these questions, I think, because I'm starting to receive questions now. So we will be coming to particular cases in a while. So Sister Saba, over to you, inshallah.
Okay, coming to Ustaza Tamia, if we talk about keeping a balance on the woman's part between her work and her family. With work, I mean both. If she's a housewife, so how she should be balancing her time between her household chores and her family. And in other case, if she is working, whether it has to be the need of the time that she has to go out and earn. And as you know, nowadays, sometimes the husbands, they demand their wife to financially support them along with her other marital responsibilities. So in both the cases, how would you advise us to balance her priorities and time management things?
I think it's a very important question. And what we definitely need to recognize is that every woman's situation is different. This entire discussion about, should a woman be working or not? Should she be studying or not while she's married? I think this very idea that should she be working, is it allowed for her to, work, etc. This really comes from a place of privilege, because a lot of women, subhanAllah, they don't have that privilege that, they can just sit at home and they can just, look after themselves and their children and their husband, etc. Some women have a financial need. Some women have, I believe these days, women have a spiritual and mental need that, we need to do something. We need to do something more than just cooking and cleaning. Not that cooking and, looking after your children, managing house, issues are not important. They have their place. But, as human beings, we need mental stimulation. We need to focus on our personal growth. And we see that, women whose personal growth is stunted because of marriage, what happens over time is that, the husband is not even able to make, a good conversation with his wife because he has gone so far ahead and she has been left so far behind. And, there's no intellectual, common grounds, you could say. That why? Because a woman's mental growth really has been stunted. It's been stopped in the name of marriage. So I think first and foremost, women need to make this a priority in their lives, that no matter what, even if you've just given birth, even if you have 5 children, 6 children, regardless of what your situation is, please, pay attention to your personal, your spiritual, your mental growth, that always you are learning something, reading something, studying something. And even, if it's not really, a very difficult or a very major course, something. Keep yourself occupied, keep yourself busy, because when you are busy with, learning and studying, etc., that is the example that you set for your children. You show them that this is important. You show them that this has a very important place in your life. And we all know that when a woman is happy, then all of a sudden everybody's happy. So when a woman has that sense of accomplishment, that I learned something today, I made a I contributed today, then this is something that affects the entire family. And really, if we always spoke about, can a woman work? Can she, do something along with, taking care of her family? Then I don't think Dr. Aisha and I would be sitting here right now, because for me, it's Sunday afternoon, it's lunchtime, and my kids are home, my husband is home, and it wouldn't be possible for me to be a part of this gathering. So the first thing I think we need to make clear is that women must make time for their personal growth, whatever that looks like. But then it's not that, we make that our ultimate goal, because a lot of people make this mistake that even when they're studying, religious knowledge, they tend to neglect worship. So we cannot do this, that we make one thing our ultimate, goal and concern, and then we neglect everything else. Because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he taught us that inna li nafsika alayka haqq, right? Your body has a right over you. Your Lord has a right over you. Your spouse has a right over you. So you have to give everyone their right. And I think personally, what has really helped me is begin with what is most important. Meaning, as a human being, what is most important in your life? It is your duty to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So beginning with salah, right? When you focus on salah, that I must pray on time and I must pray properly. And this is something that, I cannot compromise on. Then you'll notice that your day, sort of has some kind of schedule, you have some kind of routine. And when you begin with what is most important, which is ibadah, your duty to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we learn, in that hadith, that when we make time for worship, tafarragh li ibadati, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he fills our heart with contentment. And there is also, help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is blessing, in our time, in our energy, in the work that we're doing. And when we neglect our ibadah, then what happens is that our hands are filled with occupation, meaning that we're always busy. There's never a sense of accomplishment, that okay, I'm done this work. No, we will always be behind. So begin with what is most important. Begin with making Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala your priority. Never ever compromise on your duty to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then begin with what is next, which is your nafs. Meaning that, you have to make sure that you're getting enough rest. You have to make sure that you're eating healthy. You have to make sure that you are, exercising or whatever it is that is necessary for you. You have to take care of yourself. And then, of course, begin with what is next, of importance in your life. For example, when it comes to worship, even, we begin with performing the fard first, the obligation. You have to fulfill your obligation. Then you go to what is next in importance. Then what is next in importance. And if we were to, manage our responsibilities in the same way, then inshallah there will be ease in our lives. So realize what is most important, and then fulfill that, and then go to the next. Then go to the next, inshallah, like that.
Jazakallahu khairan kathira. And it's a very good advice that we should fix our priorities first to Allah, to our ibadah, and to our responsibilities accordingly, and build a connection between all these and discipline ourselves in that way. Jazakallahu khairan.
Can I add one thing?
Yes, sure.
Sister Tamia, that was a very, very beautiful and very beautiful summary. I think it's very important to sometimes put it in the form of matan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَالصَّالِحَاتُ قَانِتَاتٌ حَافِظَاتٌ لِلْغَيْبِ. When we look at priorities, feminism had actually emptied women from the most important fitrah, that distinguishes her from men, which is the fitrat al-umuma, the fitrah of motherhood, the fitrah of being a wife. And what we are seeing right now is that women are feeling that there is the need to compete not necessarily in what is part of your fitrah, but the need to compete on a financial level. It's about making money. And that comes with the feminist movement. That actually comes from the neo-Marxist idea, and also the atheist idea that people are just matter in motion. When we look at that feminist idea, and we see, for example, where Simone de Beauvoir had actually considered that the main reason for women's unsuccessfulness was really because they were caged, and that's the word, that the term that she had actually considered, that they are caged by their husbands, and that in any way that they can separate themselves, even if they separate themselves from their own biological creation by seeking abortion, that would be a way of getting into success. Unlike Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَالصَّالِحَاتُ قَانِتَاتٌ حَافِظَاتٌ لِلْغَيْبِ. If you look at فَالصَّالِحَات, this is number one, be a salihah. And then two, be a qanita. And then three, be a hafidha al-ghaib in your own home. So the number one priority that you want to consider is to be a salihah, consider guidance in Quran and Sunnah in her life. Then to go for the second level, which is qanita, to focus on spirituality and your dhikr. But the dhikr is in three forms. Dhikr, the oral dhikr, which is your salah. The visual dhikr, which is how do you understand the world around you? What's the basis that you understand the world based on? That's the visual dhikr. And finally, the behavioral dhikr. How do you relate with the people around you? Is it based on your own nafs, or is it based on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Is it based on the principle that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had commanded? And finally, which is the oral dhikr, behavioral dhikr, and the visual dhikr. Now, when we look at Hafidhatul lil ghaib, this is telling us that the third priority, Hafidha lil ghaib, in her own home, where she preserves the privacy. This is not only preserve the privacy, meaning, in the bedroom, but this is preserving the privacy, meaning preserving her duties in completing her mission, completing the responsibilities that she has in al-ghaib. What is al-ghaib? Al-ghaib is many times referring to the household. So this ayah is actually putting it in the three categories. You are salihah one. Focus on your spirituality and your qunut too. And finally, consider your home. Your home is number three. And then it will leave the rest. If you have the time to work outside, to perform certain duties outside, then good for you if you're able to. But that is fard kifaya. That's fard kifaya for you to do. But your fard ayn, the individual duty, the individual obligation that you have, is a salah, piety, is al-qunut, which is dhikr, and third is your home. Those are the fard ayn. Those are the individual obligations. If you have time for the fard kifaya, which is the community obligation, you have time for that, then go for it. But those are the fard ayn. Those are the beginning. Now, when we look at the fard kifaya and fard ayn, how do I manage my fard ayn? How do I manage the individual obligations? You manage the individual obligations by considering, again, the same acronym that we did before, the DNAIM. The deen, the nafs, the deen, your spirituality first, your nafs, your body, your health second, your aql, your mind, your education third, and your family, your chastity, all that. And then finally, the wealth. The wealth, that's if you're able to get something done from the outside. But even if you have your husband bringing in some income to the household, it is part of an amana that you spend it in a way where it considers without doing that tabdhir, without doing that wandering, that money wandering. When we look at these categories, we see that in our times, feminism is pushing that mal, that the final category, which is mal, which is money, as the first one, sexuality as the second, and mind and education in order to get to the money part, and then health. But finally looking at probably maybe yoga or spirituality as being the final thing if you have You could see that in Islam, it is the totally opposite way that the modern lifestyle is pushing the world in, which is materialistic compared to spiritual, and also considering maqasid al-sharia, and also considering the sharia maxims in where it puts man based on what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created him in that whole dynamic of their social biological creation, and in order to get to the purpose of life that preceded their own creation, the purpose of life, and where, what and why was I created from the very beginning? Was I
Jazakumullah
created
khair.
to build in this civilization or what? Yeah.
Sheikh, Jazakumullah khair. Obviously, very, very comprehensively explained, inshallah. I hope, inshallah, this advice is really sinking in. Jazakumullah khair for that. Now, Ustaz Taimiyah, my next kind of, counter question based on what you yourself and Sheikh Aisha, what they have said. Although, feminism, I just want to focus a little bit further down the line, a little bit more from kind of, you can say, not from a Western context, but from a Muslim country context, because these are two different kind of contexts and two different kind of subsets. But here, this is a very kind of a generic question which I'm going to be asking, is that most of the sisters, they normally ask that, what is that we are allowed to do outside of home? Because obviously there will be situations where they have to go outside to work, as we've explained. There's always going to be situations. So in those particular situations, what is that? What is the recommended what are the recommended pathways to work, and what are the do's and don'ts? In what are the spheres in which they can operate? Jazakallah khair.
I think when it comes to the nature of work, then Islam is very clear about what kind of work or what kind of means of earning your income are lawful, and what kind of ways are unlawful. And these are, of course, supposed to be for both men and women. There's no gender specific, okay, this is lawful for men and this is unlawful for women, or vice versa. The guidelines related to lawful and unlawful are the same. When it comes to your dress, or for example your manners, your interaction with other people, again, that is not just specific to work environment. It is something that is applicable even when you go to the market, even when you are when you have guests at home, even when you're at school, even when you are traveling or whatever. I think when it comes to the idea of women working, somehow we want to create a box, and we want to fit all women in that box, and I think that's a little unfair, because the world is so diverse. Everyone's situation is so diverse. And if we were to say, for example, that a woman should only go in the field of teaching children, for example, I think that would be very unfair, because every woman is not meant to be a teacher. And if that was the case, then I don't think it would be permissible to hire housemates, for example, or nannies, because if we're saying that a woman should work in an all female environment, then how is it fair that we have a woman who is working in our house cleaning, etc., and there's men in the house? So I think we need to step away from creating from attempting to create a box or a limitation that women should only go in this field, or they should only go in that field, because these days, subhanallah, you can do so many different types of work, and alhamdulillah, the world is such, or at least there are opportunities where people will recognize your needs, or your whatever conditions that you set. For example, I know of a lady who, mashallah, she works for IBM, and she wears full niqab because mashallah, and this is here. So it's about your skills. It's about the rules that you set for yourself. It's about, again, you making sure that Allah, His approval is my priority. So I don't want to put myself in a place, in a situation where my religion will be compromised. So every woman must consider her opportunities, her strengths, and her unique situation, and see what would be the best for her. And always be open to change. And you don't restrict yourself to, this is the only thing that I want to do. This is the only thing that's right for me, or this is the only thing that my parents want me to do, or my spouse wants me to do, or what I want to do. Be open to, change and growth, and always make the deen your guideline. That if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would disapprove of my presence over here or my working in this manner, then I have to check myself. I have to question what I'm doing. And whoever makes the taqwa of Allah their priority, then وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ, whoever fears Allah, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates a way out for them from every problem. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides for that person from where that person cannot even expect. They cannot even imagine. So regardless of what you choose to do, your priority should be to please Allah the Exalted. That you don't want to ever be in a situation where you're doing something that will bring you the disapproval of your Lord. Inshallah.
Okay, coming to Sheikha Aisha, when we talk about marital relationship, we often discuss and debate a term, Nushooz, and which is commonly understood as a disobedience from wife's side, and in which husband thinks that his wife is not obeying him, she is rebellious, or she is not doing what she is expected to do in her relationship, and then he treats or disciplines her in certain manner. My question is that what Nushooz is? If not, I would like you to define Nushooz with an example, if possible.
So for every single governance, for every single company, for every single management, there's always the management, and there's always exiting that management because of the result it may have on the company, on the management, or because of the result it may have on that bond. There's always a certain price to pay. There's always certain regulations that will be needed in order to instill that bond, whether that was a country bond or whether that was a company. There's management, any management, there's always a bond. And in Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala considered that the household stability is a very sacred, and therefore revolting against that stability and causing the lack of stability, or probably this home to fall apart, then that would be considered as nushooz. What does it mean, nushooz, and the home to fall apart, or what with all those definitions? So generally, there are certain things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had ordered women to do in terms of the husband and wife relationship. And part of that is obedience. I know many feminists will extremely hate that term and consider it or look at it from the term of a slave and a master, but that is not necessarily of a slave and master relationship, because we follow and we obey traffic rules. We never look at it from the master and slave stereotypical image that we would have, in the same way in that stereotypical image that we would have in a marriage. The reason why this stereotypical image of the word obey in a husband and wife relationship is really because from the very main idea and philosophy that feminism has, which is that husband is the counterpart, is the enemy that is behind a woman's unsuccessful life, and etc. So in Islam, nushooz is one way to help the woman And there is nushuz al-zawj as well. There is also the men committing nushuz. It's not just the woman. But when the woman goes in the frame that we're actually discussing here, when the man or woman, when they go outside the stability that is supposed to be taking and keeping this family intact, that would be considered nushuz. What frame? The frame of piety and the frame of justice. So whether it's piety, whether this man is probably drinking or this woman decided to rebel against the deen and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had ordered, or even injustice, justice to mean the way that we are supposed to be implementing the different regulations in order to raise our children in a good way. Just as probably leaving the household, and because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala regarded that a woman must only leave the household when she has a permission from her husband. So whenever either spouses go outside these two conditions, piety and justice in the deen, the nas, the aql, the ird, the mal, then that would be considered nushuz. That nushuz would have different forms, whether it's from the man committing nushuz, probably beating the wife, that's nushuz. The man, is this justice that he would beat the wife and bleed her and make her bleed and all that? That's nushuz. Is it nushuz from the woman to probably even leave the household or probably condescend her husband? That's also nushuz. So when we look at nushuz, we have to consider piety, and we have to consider the term justice in its comprehensive term in the Quran and Sunnah. So when we speak about nushuz, oftentimes it's only talked about when it's relating to to women, and not to men. But nushuz refers to both men and women.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikha, for very clearly explaining the term nushuz, that it can be from both sides. A woman can be doing that, and a man can be doing that too. So the important thing is we have to stay in the hudud which Allah has prescribed us, in which obedience and respect and love, everything comes. Jazakallah khair, Sheikha. Ustaza Taimia, coming to you. We have a joint family tradition, which you must be also very well aware of, which is very strongly practiced still in some part of the world, especially in our Asian cultures, and where the most commonly conflict which we come across regarding this tradition following is mother and daughter-in-law arguing and blaming each other on petty issues. So can you give us some guidelines how we can resolve these disagreement with some wisdom?
So I think, first of all, when it comes to the concept of, the joint family system where everybody has to live in the same house, of course, it's a cultural practice. This is not religious, religiously legislated. We see that, in certain cultures practiced by many Muslims, the concept of living with your in-laws is completely unheard of. It's unimaginable. And we see that in other cultures, especially the Asian, Pakistani, Indian culture, I don't know to what extent Bangladeshi, but subcontinent area mainly, we see that this is like a must. And God forbid if, a woman, believes that she should be living away from her in-laws, and this is considered like so wrong, that how arrogant and how stubborn and how not religious you could be to even make such a demand like that. And I strongly believe that this culture needs to change, because we have seen this is not healthy. I mean, why are we forcing people to live in environments where they're constantly in conflict? They feel attacked or they're constantly attacking, where people don't get their personal space. Every individual, has a right to their personal space. I remember I actually visited Bangladesh once, and subhanallah, we were in a very we were visiting a village, and there we went to see certain people, and extreme, people living in extreme poverty. And there was a tiny, tiny room that was divided into 3 sections. And when I looked into that room, in each section was a stove and a sink and some dishes, some pots and pans. And we were told that, this is where, the servants that live here, their wives, each of them has her own kitchen because they're not able to share a kitchen. And so while some people might say that, oh, how stubborn these women must be, I thought that was so beautiful, that every woman needs her own space. And I think every mother-in-law should think about what she went through and try to give her daughter-in-law, what she was not able to enjoy herself. And I think if every woman was to treat her daughter-in-law this way, that, what, I want you to live a happy life. I don't want you to be, constantly, in conflict. I want us to have a good relationship. Then life would be so much more beautiful. But unfortunately, what happens is that after marriage, after a woman gets married, then subhanallah, her mother-in-law, it's as if her goal is to control and to dominate over her daughter-in-law. Everything has to be my way. And the daughter-in-law's main concern becomes, I have to somehow, rebel against my mother-in-law. So there's this constant, conflict needs to stop. And I think it can only stop when each person gets their own space, where they feel safe, where they can, where they feel that, they can live however they want. They can cook however they want. Nobody's gonna, criticize them if they put the dishes a certain way, if they wash dishes a certain way. As a woman, I teach many women, and sometimes the kind of questions I get from girls, it's so hurtful. Where, for example, a girl gets married, she goes into a new house, and the mother-in-law is constantly, scolding her because she didn't put the dish sponge, in a certain place, or she used the wrong soap, or that she didn't put the dishes out in the same, in the right way. She didn't load the dishwasher the right way. Subhanallah, these are petty issues. And I think if we live and let live, each person gets their own space, really life would be so much more beautiful. But I understand it's not always possible. Sometimes, because of financial reasons, or because of the unique family situation, and it's not always possible for a woman to get her own place. So in that situation, what I would advise such a woman is both the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law, that please show adab to each other, show respect to each other, and don't be stubborn about how you want things to be. In order to live with other people, we have to make compromises. We have to sometimes acknowledge that perhaps the way the other person is doing something may be better. Perhaps I can learn something from them. And both parties need to show humility to each other. Both parties need to show respect to each other. And even within that house, please allow space to one another. For example, the mother-in-law should not always be checking on what her daughter-in-law is doing, or where she's going, or who's coming over, and always focusing on her faults, that she woke up at this time and she was out by this time, and then she came back and she's been in her room this entire time. Think about how your daughter would be in her own house. So don't always focus on her faults and her weaknesses. And the same way, the daughter-in-law should not always focus on the faults or on the weaknesses of her mother-in-law. There's more to a person than just the faults that we see. So don't just count the number of things that they have done wrong. Realize that you have your biases. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to create ease for you, to open up your heart, to allow you to enjoy a good relationship with your in-laws, and do not please involve your husband into this mess. First of all, try that there is no mess, inshallah, but then don't put your husband in such a difficult position where he's always trying to cause both parties to somehow resolve the conflict. Because on the one hand, the poor guy has his mother, and on the other hand is his wife. So how is he supposed to get them? It's a very difficult spot for him, and the way you keep him out of this is that, please, for example, the mother, the moment her son walks in, and the daughter-in-law is not there, he's sitting and she's constantly complaining to him, "Oh, your wife did this, she did this, she did that, she did this." Think about your own faults, think about your own deficiencies. Don't make your son dislike his wife. And remember that this is also a kind of ghiba. This is also a kind of backbiting. It is sinful to talk about another person in a way that they would dislike it, right? And the same way, the daughter-in-law, she should not be constantly complaining to her husband about, his mother. If there is, of course, something that you feel your husband can communicate better, then definitely solicit his help. But try to keep him out of this, and don't create problems out of nothing. And I think another important thing is that if the mother-in-law is busy, with something, she's, memorizing the Quran, for example, or she's, studying something, and the daughter-in-law also, she's got, something more important than where, how the dishes were put away or how the dishwasher was loaded. When each person has something bigger and more important in their life, then these petty issues will, inshallah, resolve on their own, inshallah.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khair, Ustaza Temia, and it was very good advice that we cannot build any relationship if we want to control that relationship. We should put up with one another's weaknesses and focus on their good things, so we can have a heart to accept good and bad together. Sheikha Aisha, would you like to add something to this?
Well, there's two ayat actually when we talk about family and the in-laws bonds. Number one is the ayah, إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. If we look at the ayah, إن الله يأمر بالعدل. العدل is the limit that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders for. العدل. العدل is the limit. Got a limit. This is the العدل. There's a certain paradigm for justice. Al-ihsan is giving. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders you. There is justice, but there's also something that it's giving. You give within. You give from within, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward you for it. Even if it is your right, but there's one side that you give in. وَيَنْهَى عَنِ الْفَحْشَاءِ وَالْمُنْكَرِ وَالْبَغِي. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbids. Al-fahsha is illicit behavior. Al-munkar is in any kind of an injustice. Al-baghi is any type of an oppression that we oppress one another, whether this was the mother-in-law or whether this is the daughter-in-law. In the other ayah, it helps us understand, well, what does baghi and what can lead to baghi or lead to munkar or even lead to fahsha, which are the three terms that were mentioned in the other ayah. Or in this ayah. The other ayah explains it. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اجتنبوا كثيرا من الظن إن بعض الظن إثم ولا تجسسوا ولا يغتب بعضكم بعضا أيحب أحدكم أن يأكل لحم أخيه ميتا. If you scrutinize this ayah, it actually gives us in a number of categories on how to maintain al-adl and how not to slip in al-baghi without us realizing. It talked about اجتنبوا كثيرا من الظن. It starts with the heart. Stay away from speculation and dhann, su'u dhann, where you would think evil of somebody, whether this is from the mother's side or the daughter-in-law. Start with the heart. Have a good, clean heart. حسن الظن. اجتنبوا كثيرا من الظن ولا تجسسوا. And even when you look at the different sides of our relationship, there's going to be the mouth, there's going to be the heart, there's going to be the eyes, there's going to be the ears, all involved in all those different tensions. So the ayah starts out حسن الظن. 2 ولا تجسسوا. Don't spy, because the eyes is going to fall on many different things that you may like or dislike. So you don't start out with spying, because that spying is going to lead to affecting your hearing, because you're going to start having that selective hearing, because التجسس can be تجسس بالسمع or can be تجسس بالنظر. It can be spying by looking at things, trying to probably open the closets to see, did she finish the work right? Did she do this? Did she do that? Did she take something that doesn't belong to her? Or trying to do selective hearing. What are they saying about her? What am I hearing? What is she trying to plot? And etc. ولا تجسسوا. تجسس, spying by the ear, or spying through hearing, or spying by seeing. ولا يغتب بعضكم بعضا. What you do with your ears and your eyes is going to result in a certain conversation. الغيبة. You're going to get involved with your mouth, and with your tongue, you're going to speak ill of others. ولا يغتب بعضكم بعضا. Now, when we look at this triangle, the heart, the eyes, and the ears, and also the mouth, when we fix those three sides, that's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will lead our hearts to finding the inner peace on the inside, where we are practicing al-adl, and we're going to be able to practice al-ihsan, because al-ihsan is a higher level, and we're going to be able to preserve our hearts from al-fahsha and al-baghi, from illicit behavior, from injustice, and also oppression.
Okay, Jazakallah khair, Sister Sheikh Aisha. Now, inshallah, we'll be starting the Q&A. Now, this actually finishes the kind of the first segment. Jazakallah khair to both the panelists, to Ustaza Taimi and Sheikh Aisha. I think, alhamdulillah, we have covered, although we couldn't obviously in such discussions, it's literally impossible to cover all aspects. So what we try to do is to cover the most important aspects, and then devote a bit of time to Q&A, inshallah. So the first question I'm just going to be pasting now, inshallah. So you can, inshallah, see on the screen now, just in a second. And this question is to Ustaza Taimiyah, please. If you can answer this question, please. Although this has been answered to a large extent, but if you can just give a very brief answer to this.
So the question mainly is that a lot of times it's, female relatives, from the in-laws who are basically turning her husband away from her. Yeah? Did I understand the question correctly?
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in this situation, what should she do? Right? I think first and foremost, it's important that we believe that even if the whole world were to gather together to harm us with something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not decreed for us, they will never ever be able to harm us. And if they all gather together to benefit us with something which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not decreed for us, they will not be able to benefit us. So no one can harm us. No one can damage, the blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us without the permission of Allah, right? Nothing happens illa bi'idnillah. So first of all, do not fear the people who spread lies about you, or who spread, negative things about you. Do not fear them, and do not, and believe that, they don't have full control over the situation. They can do whatever they want, but they cannot be successful without the permission of Allah. So this means that based on this belief, your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should be extremely strong, in the sense that you're constantly seeking the help of Allah, and you're constantly seeking guidance from Allah, and you're constantly giving yourself in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's protection. That is the most important way of dealing with, our difficulties, our challenges, and especially with people who become a trial for us, that you seek the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you believe that people cannot harm you except by the permission of Allah. So don't fear them. And don't always try to find out, so what is it that they're saying, and what is it that they're doing, and how is it that I can defend myself, and what is it that I can do to make sure that they're not successful. Stop fearing them, and start viewing people the way they're truly, who they truly are. They're people, they're weak, and even if they have the most malicious intentions, they cannot be successful. Think about Yusuf alayhi salam. His brothers threw him into the well. Why? To get rid of him. But if they knew that Yusuf alayhi salam was going to end up in Egypt, right, because he was going to be picked up by a caravan and then sold into Egypt, and then he was going to be raised in, or he was going to live in the house of Aziz, and then eventually reach the level that he reached, his brothers would have never thrown him in the well. They would have instead jumped themselves into the well, right? Because they wanted to harm him, but they weren't really able to harm him. So remember, Wallahu ghalibun ala amrihi, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ghalib over his decision. This is one of the interpretations, that meaning when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides something, then he prevails over that matter. He all power is with him. So this is the first thing that we need to remember. Secondly, what I would advise you to do is make sure that your relationship with your spouse is a healthy one. Because if your husband knows you, the way you are, the way you speak, the way that you treat other people, he trusts you and he loves you, then even if people, say the most, negative things about you, your husband knows who you are, right? And inshallah, as a wise person, he wouldn't be that gullible. But then we see that sometimes even the best of men, can get affected by what people say. We see that, there was that rumor about Aisha radiallahu anha, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he was a bit distant from Aisha radiallahu anha, in the sense that she was unwell for the entire month, and she felt that there was something wrong, but she didn't know what it was. So in that case, you do clarify yourself. You do, when that opportunity arises, you do give your perspective that, what, this happened or this did not happen, and this is what I thought. You give your point of view. You do express yourself. You do clarify matters. But then again, even after you clarify matters, realize that true help will come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even Aisha radiallahu anha, she expressed that in her beautiful words, that Allah is the one whose help is sought, right? Wallahu musta'an. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one whose help I seek, against the lies that people are spreading, against the false things that people are saying. So, realize that the help will come from Allah, and keep asking Him, inshallah, and don't fear people.
Jazakumullah khair. Just a small little request to the panelists. I understand, these types of questions require obviously long answers, but, we obviously need to, the priority is to get as many questions as we can. So Sheikh Aisha, the next question is coming to you now. You can see on the screen now. Yeah, Sheikh, I think you're on mute. You can unmute yourself, inshallah. And basically, towards the end part of the question, the sister is asking that what is your advice to the teenagers in such context? Because, they look at these particular hijabi models, etc.
This actually goes back to al-wala wal-bara. When you look at, Tahr ibn Ashur. Tahr ibn Ashur is one of those Tunisian scholars. He wrote the book Al-Tahrir wa-Tanwir al-Tafsir. He was one of those very very knowledgeable scholars, and had deep insight. And he actually explained one hadith, and he says that when the hadith actually talked about that he talked about certain practices that were practiced during the Prophet ﷺ, which is tattooing and doing certain things with their teeth, etc. He said that that was because it was the fashion for fasiqat, it was for deviated women. And he said that would mean that every single practice that is done by deviated groups, it does not match libasu taqwa. When you look at the ayah, يا بني آدم قد أنزلنا إليكم لباسا يواري سوآتكم وريشا ولباس التقوى ذلك خير. When you look at the ayah, it talked about, oh, children of Adam, we had sent onto you garments, different types of materials, etc. And then it said وَلِبَاسُ التَّقْوَى ذَلِكَ خَيْرٌ. There, you don't think of libas or garment of taqwa. You think of garment as nice, cold, revealing. What do you think of it? But the ayah said libasu taqwa. There is a garment of taqwa, and this is the base. There's a garment of taqwa, and that's why even the ayah, it included when it told the Prophet ﷺ, Ya ayyuhan nabi, then it said it to his wives, the believing, and then it said the believing women, nisa'il mu'minin. There's that motivation, that libasul taqwa, that attire. Do you feel that you're part of the mu'mineen, or is that attire making you feel that you fit within some kind of a group that is trying to reveal certain matters, or is trying to fit in a certain category of akhlaq? So libas al-taqwa is a religious, or let me call it an attire of piety, an attire of spirituality. We cannot separate attire from the taqwa that it may have, that may have the piety, the spirituality that it may affect, or even have that influence. So this is really important. So for the young girls, you ask yourself, is that attire for you to fit in with a certain group that on the inside is not a top group, or is that imitating the salihat? Is that imitating libas al-taqwa? Don't manipulate yourself, because the shaitan knows how to manipulate you. So you want to remember that in the end, you're going to pay the price in your taqwa.
Jazakumullah khair, Sheikh Aisha. Ustaz Taimiyya, this is the next question for you, please.
What should one ask Allah when he or she? Oh, this is hers? Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, this is.
So, a dua for marriage, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, you can say.
Yeah. Definitely, when it comes to marriage, this is something that I think as girls grow older, this is something that we constantly put into the heads of our girls, that you're going to get married, you have to be married, and we make that sort of like that ultimate goal. And I think, first of all, families play a very, very important role in how they talk to their girls. That how is it that we define the worth of our girls? Is it only by the fact that they're married, the fact that they have a really lavish wedding, etc., or is it that we encourage them to pursue things that will, inshallah, help them earn the approval of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And I think this is something that we need to take really, really seriously, because when we only focus on the physical aspect of our girls, that you need to look beautiful, you need to dress beautifully, and you need to have an amazing wedding day, and you need to have Prince Charming as your husband, etc. We've become so superficial that this is how girls view themselves, and this is why when it comes to clothing, etc., girls generally don't care about what is good, what is not. When it comes to marriage, again, they're not concerned about what kind of a person the potential spouse is. Sometimes the obsession is just with, oh, I just want to get married. I just want to get married. I just want to look good. So I think as mothers, as older sisters, as grandmothers, as aunts, this is something that, we need to talk to our girls about, that, you are more than just how you look. You are more than, the fact that you're married or not. Because subhanallah, this is a time where so many women, they don't find suitable spouses. That this is really a huge concern in our times, where so many women of marriageable age are not married because they're not able to find suitable spouses. So, but if a woman believes that her worth is only determined by the fact that she's married, then this is so upsetting. So first of all, we need to change the way that we talk to our girls, that their obsession should not just be married, should not just be to be married. It should be more than just, more than just, the superficial things in life. Secondly, where, a woman wants to get married, then of course, dua is one of the most important means that we can adopt. And for that, when you make dua, there's so many beautiful du'as in the Quran. I love the dua of Musa alayhi salam. Rabbi inni lima anzalta ilayya min khayrin faqir. You see, Musa alayhi salam, he helped people who were in need, the two women that he saw, who needed his help. They did not ask for help, but Musa alayhi salam himself took the initiative. He went and helped them. And then he made dua. And we see that his dua was, subhanAllah, instantly responded to. How he not only did he get a job and
Sorry,
stability.
I understand.
I'm just going to end within a sentence, okay?
Yeah, inshallah.
So not only was his, what was I saying now? I lost my train of thought. SubhanAllah. Yeah, so he got so much more than just marriage. So reflect on the du'as of the prophets, and this du'a of Musa alayhi salam, it's amazing. Rabbi inni lima anzalta ilayya min khayrin faqir. That, oh my Lord, I am in desperate need of whatever good you send my way. But then along with that, also try to help other people. When you will help others, you will also receive the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Jazakumullah khair. Sheikh Aisha, the next one is coming for you. This is a particular fiqh question. Please answer. I think this shouldn't hopefully take a long time, inshallah. Yeah, it should come on the screen now, inshallah.
The question, if the wife takes khula from her husband, then is there any way for them to get back together? The husband had said talaq to the wife twice with a gap of almost 2 years. Please advise if they can be together. I think that the question has two sides of it. First of all, talaq is different than khula. So did he say talaq or not? If he said talaq, then this is talaq, not khula. All right? If
twice, the questioner is saying twice he has said it, not 3 times, with a gap of 2 years.
So okay, so if talaq happened, then this is not khula, because the question is saying she did khula and the husband did talaq twice.
No, I'll just repeat the question again. So the question is that basically there was an instance of talaq first from the husband. So basically he said over a period of 2 years he said talaq twice, and then beyond that, after that, she has taken khula.
So scholars had different opinions on whether khula can be done for more than once, or even done for more than 3 times, or even an unlimited number. So just to make the story short, because we don't have time, the majority of the scholars actually considered that khula is an unlimited number of times. So if they did already talaq twice, then she would need because they've been he did not return her after that, then they can get into the marriage again. They can get into the marriage again, but with a new marriage contract. They would need a new marriage contract, a new consent. Then if they get into the marriage again, and if they wanted to do khula, there is an unlimited number of khula according to a large majority of scholars. So they can do khula a number of times. And in fact, in the Kitab I'lam al-Muwaqqi'in, he actually regarded that this is a better way than actually doing talaq, because talaq has a limited number. So they can get together again after a new marriage contract and a new consent. And then if they needed to do khulu', they can do another khulu', and she would not be required to marry another man in order to get back to the husband if she wanted to go back.
Jazakumullah khair. Now this is the next question to Saza Taimiyya, please.
So the question is regarding women staying at home, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran to the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that وَقَرْنَ فِي بُيُوتِكُنَّ, that stay in your homes. So first of all, regarding that ayah, some have said that this is specifically for the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This was an instruction that was specifically for them and not the rest of the women. And others say that no, the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam are supposed to be a model and example for the rest of the women. Now, when we see the practical, application of the ayah, the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they did go out of their homes. We learn about them, visiting their families. We learn about, the fact that they went, for Hajj, etc. So they did go out of their homes. What I understand from this ayah is, especially when you look at the next part of the verse, وَقَرْنَ فِي بُيُوتِكُنَّ وَلَا تَبَرَّجْنَ تَبَرُّجَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ الْأُولَى. That a woman, her concern should not always be to, be out and about. Why? Because if you're constantly out and about, then that basically means that you don't really have, your home, your family is not really a priority for you. And you are basically neglecting yourself. Going out is something, and going out constantly over and over again for every little thing. This physically drains you. And subhanAllah, there's so much focus that women have on their physical appearance, on their outward appearance, that now I cannot wear the same clothes when I'm going out. I have to wear a different hijab. I have to wear a different abaya. I have to wear different clothes, etc. If all of her focus is on being a social butterfly, it means that she doesn't have something concrete, something solid as her goal. And I think this ayah is basically directing us away from just distracting ourselves to having more solid, concrete goals. And the next part of the ayah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, do not display your adornment like, in the time of ignorance, because this is what happens to a lot of women, that, when we're constantly focused on, socializing and going out and, being, around people, visiting one place after the other, then there's so much focus on, our external, that we begin to neglect our internal state. We're so focused on looking good outwardly that we don't pay much attention to, looking beautiful or being beautiful on the inside. And when we look at these verses, there is also the mention where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that وَذْكُرْنَ, that make mention of, remember, the verses of Allah which are recited in your homes, as well as wisdom, meaning make time for the recitation of the Quran, for the learning of the Quran, and for teaching it, because dhikr doesn't just include, that you are doing it for yourself, but it also means you mention it to others. And the wives of the Prophet ﷺ are an amazing example. Look at the contribution of Aisha radiallahu anha, the contribution of Salama radiallahu anha, where they, had more goals than just, socializing with people. They had better goals. Aisha radiallahu anha, she would ask questions from the Prophet ﷺ. And after his death, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she contributed so much. So I think, instead of just looking at these words and saying, oh, women should stay home and do nothing else, that's unrealistic. That's impossible. Being at home is or locking a person up at home is a form of punishment. And this is not the goal, that a woman should be caged in the house. But what I think we can appreciate, what we can take from these verses is that we need to focus on our personal growth, our spiritual growth, and we need to think about the skills we're building, the knowledge that we're learning, and we need to focus on what we are contributing. So inshallah.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khair. The last two questions, I understand we are kind of 4 minutes over time, so inshallah the last two questions, this one to Sheikha Aisha, please. The question I think has been it's not I think it says and vice versa. At the end it says vice versa. If there is if the wife normally in our society the questioner is asking, there's no consideration for the needs of the wife.
I don't think I understood the question.
I think it's kind of speaking about the marital relationship.
What about it? I didn't understand.
Yeah, basically that the questioner is saying that is there any consideration of going against, for example, if the wife is not in a position to accept his husband's advances, so is there anything that she can actually refuse? Because in a patriarchal society, once again, there is a notion amongst the husbands and the men that the wife needs to obligate to whatever demand the husband is making. Especially
I'm sorry.
in the marital relationship.
I still wasn't able to understand the question. There was a sound that was breaking.
Yeah, sorry, I'll repeat the question again. So the question is that in a particular situation where the husband is calling the wife to the bed and she refuses due to whatever reason, is that something, because the man has a notion that the woman cannot refuse, and on top of that the questioner is also asking, is the situation the same for the wives as well? Because obviously in our cultures this is something which is frowned upon.
Okay, now I understand the question. So number one is that not all cases are the same. So in general, let's say it that way, is that she shouldn't be refusing the bed for just any reason. If there was harm, let's say her gynecologist told her that she should not be intimate because of probably some kind of an infection, etc., then this is harm. So in situations where there's harm, that would be haram for her to reject her husband. But the request was not the same when it comes to the man, because by their physical creation, the man is not capable of engaging in that act if he was not prepared for it. But it is not necessarily the same for the woman. But at the same time, the Prophet ﷺ does mention in the hadith where he speaks of the man that would harm his wife and abuse her psychologically throughout the day and request her or ask her to be intimate with him at the end of the night. He compares it to an animal. And that's the same thing, is that if the woman is not prepared psychologically, it is part of honor that the man respects that woman's honor, that the man respects that woman's desire, and that does not approach in a way where she's not prepared. But at the same time, if we're talking in terms of consent in Islam, the consent started during the day or on the day of the marriage contract. And when you ask somebody to fulfill a certain task or a certain duty, we have to always keep in mind whether their body is physically, or whether it was designed to function in that way or not. A woman's body can function in a way where even if she may not have the desire, she is able to do it, unless she is feeling pain. Then that's a different story. Then la darar wa la dirar, she does not have to accept if there's pain, if there's harm. But for a man, you cannot have him perform something that even his body was not made to function that way.
Okay, Jazakallah khair. And I think the last question now to Ustaza Taimia, please. It's coming up now. Although it's kind of a very long-winded question, but I think maybe again, you can speak on behalf of different organizations, maybe, you're attached with, as to how we can help, inshallah, the teenagers and the people who are, especially the sisters who want to get married and the brothers who want to get married. This is kind of that type of question.
So I think, first of all, we need to understand that it is not the responsibility of the individual to find themselves a spouse, especially when it comes to women. This is the responsibility of the community. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَنْكِحُ الْأَيَامَ مِنْكُمْ, that those who are single among you, you should get them married, meaning find them a good spouse, help them get married. So I think as a community, we should realize and we should be aware that, if there's if there is a woman of marriageable age who wants to get married, if there's a man of marriageable age who wishes to get married, then don't just leave it to them. It is the responsibility of the community to help them in this matter. And secondly, the individuals who are looking for a potential spouse, then definitely, like the sister mentioned, that she doesn't know many people, she's basically at home. Then in that case, remember, dua is something powerful. Okay, dua is something very, very powerful. And secondly, like I mentioned earlier, that when you help others, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps you. So any opportunity that you can find where you can be a source of help for others, where you can, be of benefit to others, where you can show gratitude to people for, what they have, how they have helped you. You take that step to build connections with people, not so that you can get something in return from them, but to appreciate their favor or to offer them, your help and assistance. Then inshallah, through these connections that are for the sake of Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bless you with whatever that is best for you, inshallah. And also another thing is that realize that, marriage is not your only source of worth. You are worthy even if you're not married. You are worthy even if you're single. And we learn that in Jannah, no one is going to be single. So don't think of yourself as someone who is not good enough, or that nobody wants me, or that I'm not likable, or that I'm just not good enough because I'm still single. Your worth is because of your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not because of your your merit status. And of course, like I mentioned, make dua, build connections with people however that you can, and leave the matter to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you what is best for you, inshallah.
Jazakumullah khair. Ustaza, just, if you would like to give any kind of parting advice as well, Ustaza Taimiyah, and then we'll come to Sheikh Aisha to wrap it up, inshallah. If you have any kind of parting advice you can give, inshallah.
I think I would just advise women, because this is supposed to be, this is a session where you mentioned that no cross advice. Yeah. So what I would advise women is, please focus on your personal growth, your spiritual development, your mental growth. Keep learning, keep improving, keep building your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Always make that a priority, whether you are married or not, whether you have children or you don't, whether your spouse is, your best friend or not. Regardless of what your situation is, your goal should be to keep to keep growing and bettering yourself in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah.
Jazakumullah khair. Sheikh Aisha, your parting advice, please.
Allah yahfadhku. I think Sister Taimiyah Zubair did an awesome job, and I agree with her on the advice, and I think I second myself, and let the advice that she gave be the advice that I would leave off here.
Okay, Jazakumullah khair wa ahsan al-jaza. To both the panelists, Sheikh Aisha, Ustaz Taimiyah, once again, we thank you on behalf of Live Deen and on behalf of Islamic Youth Club International. To both the panelists, to Sister Saba, we thank the audience. Alhamdulillah, I think the audience would have benefited a lot today. So this is, like I said in the beginning, this is the first of the 3-part series, inshallah, we are going to be having. Today's session was concentrating on the advice to our sisters, to the wives and the wives-to-be, And inshallah, the next session, which is going to be on the 12th of July, is going to be solely dedicated for advice to the brothers. And being a man, brothers need a lot of advice. Alhamdulillah, I think sisters, mashallah, they are looking for always avenues for advice. But brothers, unfortunately, they are not even looking for avenues for advice. So I would request all the brothers in attendance, all the wives in attendance, to make sure that your husbands attend next week, because next week's session is going to be, inshallah, is really great. It's going to be really great because we are going to be having Sheikh Abdul Rahim McCarthy and Sheikh Wasim Kempson as well, both on the show together. So Jazakumullah khair once again to everyone for joining. So inshallah, we are looking forward to seeing you next Sunday, same time at 8 p.m. Saudi time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.